All right, Niners faithful, let's dive into this wild roller coaster of a game because there's a lot to unpack here. This matchup between San Francisco and Jacksonville was the type of contest that leaves you frustrated, encouraged, and scratching your head all at the same time. It felt messy, chaotic, and yet still had flashes of brilliance that show why the Niners continue to be a dangerous team despite coming up short on the scoreboard. And trust me, there are some positives to hold onto even if the ending stings. First things first, let's clear the air with the injury updates because that's always the cloud hanging over every game. Brock Purdy addressed his situation, and it looks like that toe scare isn't anything to be worried about. He's already saying he feels good and ready to go, which is huge considering how important his mobility has been to keep plays alive this season. Then there's Jawan Jennings. He took that brutal shot to the ribs where most people watching thought he was done for the night, maybe even longer. I mean, he looked like a guy who had cracked ribs, doubled over in pain, barely able to breathe. But somehow, against all odds, he came back into the game, kept battling, and afterwards said he has no doubt he'll suit up against the Rams. That's massive for San Francisco, because if you remember last season's clash with Los Angeles, Jennings had the game of his life. Back then, the offense didn't even have Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, or Christian McCaffrey on the field, and Jennings stepped up to become the hero in a matchup that was closer than anyone expected. His confidence now, saying he'll be good to go this Thursday, is the kind of energy the Niners need, especially with some other guys banged up. Now, speaking of the game itself, let's talk offense. Statistically, it wasn't terrible at all. In fact, San Francisco racked up just shy of 400 total yards, which is no small accomplishment against a defense that's been quietly solid all season. That tells me the Niners still know how to move the football. There were drives that stalled, turnovers that flipped the script, but when they absolutely needed to pick up yards, they found ways to do it. That's not always something you can say after a loss. Brock Purdy, for all the mistakes and for all the bad luck with tipped passes, still showed resilience. There were moments where he extended plays, found his guys, and looked like the steady quarterback we've gotten used to seeing. Sure, 2 of those interceptions were brutal, but one of them really just comes down to Christian McCaffrey being undersized for that particular matchup, and the ball ended up bouncing the wrong way. It happens. Another interception felt like bad timing and maybe a questionable decision, but that's part of being an aggressive quarterback trying to make something happen. Christian McCaffrey himself had a mixed outing. On the ground, he was bottled up. 17 carries for 49 yards isn't the kind of stat line we're used to seeing from him. That's under 3 yards per carry, and no one would call that good. But in the passing game, he was a monster again. 6 receptions for 92 yards, leading the team for the 4th straight week. That's incredible consistency from a guy who has been asked to do so much for this offense. He had one gorgeous 29-yard catch and run that reminded everyone just how dangerous he is when he gets into space. Yes, there was another frustrating drop, and yes, it's bizarre to see him have that issue in back-to-back games, but you can't ignore the fact that he's keeping this passing attack alive when other weapons are struggling to stay healthy. And speaking of other weapons, how about Ricky Pearsall? That one-handed catch falling on his back was straight-up highlight reel material. It's the kind of play you watch on loop and still don't understand how he managed to secure it. Plays like that remind you why this team drafted him and why there's so much hope he can become a consistent piece in this offense moving forward. Unfortunately, he looked like he might be sidelined this Thursday, but with a 10-day break afterward, the expectation is that he'll be back soon. Still, it hurts not having him because he was starting to find his rhythm. The drops were another storyline that can't be ignored. Kinder Bourne had 3 that stood out, and 2 of them were flat-out killers. One wiped out what should have been a big first down, and another came a high-pressure moment when the Niners absolutely needed to keep the drive alive. To his credit, he owned up to it after the game, but accountability doesn't change the fact that those missed opportunities directly impacted the outcome. And then there was Jawan Jennings with the drop in the end zone before halftime. Now, I'm not going to crush him too hard for that, because 9 times out of 10 he makes that play. Purdy put the ball exactly where it needed to be, right where only Jennings could grab it, and usually he does. But on that play, it just didn't happen, and instead of 6 points, the Niners had to settle for 3. Those little moments pile up. While the offense had its ups and downs, the defense deserves some recognition. They bent at times, but they also came through in critical spots. Jacksonville often started with great field position thanks to turnovers, bad special teams plays, or penalties, yet the defense managed to hold them to field goals more than once. That's not easy when you're basically asking them to defend short fields all night. Fred Warner was all over the place, flying to the football and making key stops. Rookie D. Winters quietly put together a double-digit tackle game, and Upton Stout made what looked like a game-changing interception that unfortunately got erased by one of the softest pass interference calls you'll ever see. Seriously, I don't know what the officials thought they saw on that play. Stout was playing the ball, had every right to go up for it, and the contact was minimal at best. To take away that moment from him was brutal, and it completely shifted momentum. And that brings us to the referees. Now, I'm never one to put a loss solely on officiating, because the Niners had enough chances to win this game without relying on calls. But man, it really did feel like San Francisco was playing against three opponents: Jacksonville, the refs, and themselves. There was the decline penalty situation where Kyle Shanahan clearly tried to step in and correct what the officials admitted afterward was a mistake, yet nothing could be done. That should never happen in the National Football League. If the referees know they blew it before the next snap, there has to be a mechanism to fix it. Then there was the so-called completion to Travis Hunter that, on replay, looked like anything but. The ball clearly hit the ground before he ever secured control, but because of the way it was called on the field, there wasn't enough evidence to overturn it. Plays like that just add insult to injury. And of course, that phantom pass interference we just talked about. It's exhausting. Special teams were flat out bad. There's no sugarcoating it. The punt return touchdown given up was a dagger. You simply cannot allow that. And it's the type of mistake that often makes the difference between winning and losing. In fact, if you erase that one play, San Francisco probably walks away with a victory despite the turnovers. That's how costly it was. The only saving grace for special teams was the blocked field goal later in the game. But that one highlight doesn't erase the disaster of giving up 7 points in the return game. So when you add it all up, the story of this game becomes pretty clear. The Niners had plenty of opportunities, but they kept shooting themselves in the foot. For turnovers, 7 drops, blown special teams coverage, and questionable officiating combined to dig a hole that was just too deep to climb out of. And yet, even with all of that, they still had the ball in their hands late with a chance to steal the win. That speaks volumes about the talent on this roster and the resilience of this group, but it also highlights the thin margin for error in the NFL. One mistake can undo an entire night of hard work. The offensive line deserves a mention too, and not in a positive way. Purdy was under duress on that final drive where he fumbled, and while people might want to put it on him, the reality is he had dodged the first rusher brilliantly. But when you have 2 defenders getting hands on the quarterback within 4 seconds, that's not on the quarterback. That's on the protection breaking down. Eric Armstead, the former Niner, came up with a strip that sealed the deal for Jacksonville. And honestly, you can't ask your quarterback to do much more when the walls are collapsing that quickly. All in all, this game was a perfect example of the NFL's unforgiving nature. You can dominate stretches, rack up nearly 400 yards of offense, and still lose because of mistakes in key moments. The defense gave everything they had, the offense showed flashes of brilliance, but special teams collapses and costly turnovers made the difference. It's a tough pill to swallow, but there were lessons and positives buried underneath all the frustration. Let's break this down even deeper by looking at how the game actually unfolded drive by drive, because when you zoom in on the sequence of possessions, the story gets even clearer. From the very beginning, the 49ers were showing signs of inconsistency. The first offensive push looked promising. They moved the ball with purpose, but once they got into the red zone, they stalled out. Instead of punching it in for 6, they settled for a field goal. That set the tone right away. The Niners could move the ball, but they just weren't cashing in when it mattered most. On the second drive, disaster struck. The team was finding rhythm, the chains were moving, and then a fumble flipped momentum on its head. Instead of building a 2-score cushion, They handed Jacksonville an opening that kept the home crowd energized and put the defense right back on the field earlier than they should have been. Then came the next big mistake, an interception. Brock Purdy tried to thread a layered throw into a tight window, and it didn't go his way. Whether it was tipped slightly or simply underthrown, the result was the same, another turnover. These are the types of moments that kill a team's confidence early, because you know the defense is already tired, and now you're forcing them to step back out there with terrible field position. Add in a 3-and-out on the following drive, and it became clear that the defense was carrying too much of the burden while the offense sputtered. The Jaguars capitalized, piecing together longer and cleaner drives. When you looked at the Jacksonville drive chart compared to San Francisco's, the contrast was striking. Their possessions looked neat, productive, and steady, while the 49ers sheet was littered with stops, giveaways, and short possessions. Before halftime, the Niners put together a really solid march down the field, only to see Jawan Jennings drop what should have been a touchdown. That ball was placed perfectly, right where only he could make the grab. 99 times out of 100 he pulls it in, but on this night, it just slipped through his hands. Instead of going into the locker room with the type of boost you desperately want on the road, the 49ers had to accept another field goal. Those lost points matter, especially in tight games, and this one ended up hinging on razor-thin margins. The second half started with promise. San Francisco came out of the locker room and delivered a long, balanced drive, capped with a touchdown, followed by a successful 2-point conversion. Suddenly, the energy shifted. The Niners looked alive, like maybe the adjustments had worked. But momentum didn't stay on their side for long. On the very next key possession, Purdy threw another interception. Watching the replay, it never really looked like that ball had much of a chance. Triple coverage, bad angle, maybe tipped just slightly, but the decision itself was risky. Those are the types of throws that, if they're an inch higher or lower, can be game-changing completions, but when they miss the mark, they become game-killing turnovers. Later, another drive ended with Kendrick Bourne's brutal drop on 3rd down. That one stung because the offense needed to keep the chains moving, and instead the punt team was trotting back onto the field. And even though the defense responded with a massive stand, those missed chances started piling up like bricks on the Niners' shoulders. Then there was the turnover on downs when Demarcus Robinson couldn't corral a high pass. It was catchable, but not easy, and that's been the story of this offense at times. Not making the routine plays look routine. You could feel the frustration boiling over at that point. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to 49ers Zone and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the San Francisco 49ers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. The NFL world is buzzing with whispers and speculations after what sources are calling a shocking move. Tyreek Hill, the electrifying wide receiver, has reportedly abandoned the Miami Dolphins and is now rumored to be donning the colors of the San Francisco 49ers. The news, still unofficial, has set social media on fire, leaving fans, analysts, and insiders scrambling to piece together the details. Hill, known for his blazing speed and game-changing plays, has been a cornerstone of the Dolphins' offense since his arrival. His ability to stretch the field and break defenses has made him a perennial highlight reel presence. Yet, despite the successes in Miami, murmurs of dissatisfaction and tension behind the scenes have been circulating for months. Could it be a clash of philosophies, a desire for a bigger stage, or simply the lure of a championship contender? The 49ers, fresh off a season of ups and downs, might just be the perfect landing spot for the playmaker. Insiders suggest that Hill's potential move to San Francisco could reshape the NFC landscape entirely. Pairing his speed with the 49ers' dynamic offense, led by a quarterback known for precision and flair, would create nightmares for opposing defenses. The pairing is already fueling speculation. Could this be the final piece in a Super Bowl push for San Francisco, or is it just another rumor destined to swirl endlessly until contracts are signed? Fans have reacted with a mix of shock, excitement, and skepticism. Dolphins supporters are mourning the possible loss of a star, while 49ers enthusiasts are envisioning highlight reels and long touchdown passes. Analysts are debating the financial and strategic implications, questioning whether the trade, if confirmed, could spark a chain reaction of moves across the league. For now, it remains a tantalizing story in flux, a narrative of speed, ambition, and intrigue. Whether Hill truly takes the field in Levi's Stadium or whether this is a fleeting rumor, one thing is certain. The NFL offseason just became a lot more electrifying. Keep your eyes on the headlines because if this move comes to fruition, it could change the course of the league as we know it. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the San Francisco 49ers, make sure to subscribe to 49ers Zone and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.